What major challenges did you incur, and how did you overcome them?
Well, number one is being black at the Courier Journal. I was the first black they hired as a journalist. Was a major move. I felt like a fly in a bowl of milk. And you had to do your job well because you didn't want to give them any excuse to tell you, well, you can't make it, we'll wait and find somebody else. And so that was a hell of a challenge. Not only that, I decided I wanted to cover the problems of African Americans in Louisville, which meant I had to keep a close eye and a close ear on what was going on in Western Louisville and Russell neighborhood and what have you. And the people had to believe me and trust me, and they did. And they gave me stories that none of the papers would have and none of the television stations would have until after we had published it. They would save it for Merv. Got something special to tell you. We're getting ready to meet over so-and-so. Even times when they met at my house. But they trusted me. I did the best I could to give them accurate coverage, and the rest of the city found out that they existed and what they were doing. And so it worked fine.
So talk about your evolution at Courier Journal, because you started as a reporter, but you didn't end up a reporter. Can you talk about?
I started as an artist. And this is what happens in life. You never know when a new challenge is going to arrive. I started as an artist. It was only when they looked up there was going to be a major rally of black folks in the West End, and they didn't have any black folks to send down there, and they didn't want to send any whites because they were afraid that they might get injured. And so they looked out, and I said, I'll do it, and they sent me. And when I came back, the publisher, Barry Bingham, said, we don't need none of Mervin's artwork. Mervin, there's a new program at Columbia University specifically to take people who are already in the business and give them training on being journalists. And we want to send you there. I said, oh my God, how much is this going to cost? He said, don't worry, we're going to put your salary in the bank while you're gone that you would have made here. And we're going to pay all your expense and give you a few dollars to put in your pocket. I said, that sounds like a winner to me. Mm-hmm. And so here I went to New York. My first 6 hours, I had a neck hurt because I spent all that time looking up at the buildings. It was a whole new experience for me. After all, I came from Opelousas, Louisiana. We talking about way in the bayou. And to be in New York and seeing all of this activity going on, and then to meet others from other newspapers in other cities who were there doing the same thing I was. And so it was 12 of us in this class. And then we had some of the best black journalists in the country to come and lecture us and work one-on-one with us to get us ready to get out there and open the doors. And when I left there, that was the whole summer, when I left there, I felt ready. And so I came in and I didn't have any problem. You know, I was
so
bold enough.
You went from journalist and then you became an editor. All
Yeah.
right. Well, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, when you do your job well, when you find that you have got contacts that nobody else in the building has got that are usable contacts, they quickly put you in a situation where you know you're moving forward because you're now an editor. And that's what happened with me.
So how long after you were a journalist, from being an artist to journalist, how long did it take you to get to becoming an editor?
Months, few months. because I was always hungry. All you had to do was open the door and give me a shot at it. And it didn't take long. And after that, they're not gonna push you back. Doors would open. Then what I did was I got political. There was a new group that had just formed called the National Association of Black Journalists. I got involved in that. I said, I want to go to that convention. They said, fine, go. We'll take care of the expense. Well, what did I do? I went there and I ran for president. I ran for vice president first and won that. And then I ran for president after that and won that. And so all of a sudden, all the brothers knew me, and I was in a leadership position that was highly visible because all the other newspapers and television stations in the country were looking at us to see who is going to show up. And so I had other offers, but the Courier made sure that I knew I was more than welcome here, and I was. And that's why I ended up staying with them 30 some odd years.
So tell me a little bit about the greatest lesson or lessons that you've had in life.
Oh, one of the lessons I learned had to do with something that happened later in my life. At age 50, I developed cancer, and that wasn't something that I had planned on, okay? And so you go to the doctor, and the doctor, they go through the diagnosis and stuff, and you hear those three famous words that nobody wants to hear. You have cancer. And so a shock sets in. And so now you're thinking, okay, what's going to happen? Some people say, oh man, you got cancer, you're going to die. Well, yeah, I'm going to die. You are too. Okay? But I'm probably not going to die of this cancer. So one of the adjustments and things that they have to adapt to is, and a challenge is, how do I deal with this? And the lesson that I learned from it was that things happen, and things that you have no control over. What you do have control over is the attitude that you take when things do happen to you. So if you lose a job, or you lose a child, or you lose a parent, or you lose your home or something, that's going to happen. But how you deal with that is what's all important. So once I was diagnosed with cancer, and my dad died when he was 37 years old. He died of cancer. And so this was all coming at me, And so I made the adjustment. I did a lot of praying. That was one of the adjustments that I made. I prayed, and I became a practicing Christian at that time. And so God answered my prayers. And so I was able to get through the cancer. Now, keep in mind, I'm a 25-year survivor now. So this wasn't something that happened 2 weeks ago. So making the adjustment. And what having cancer and surviving cancer has also done is given me an opportunity to help other people. Because I talk to groups, individuals, I talk to groups, I make presentations at different places about cancer and health-related illnesses. And that's been pleasing. That's been rewarding to me. And I have people who come up and say, I remember you from last year. You talked to our group and da-da-da-da-da. And as a result, I went and got that screening and such and such and such. I was diagnosed, but because I did get my screening, it was detected early, and so now I've got all kinds of treatments going. So that's been challenging, but it's also been personally rewarding.
That's great. Okay, so what do you see as the major challenge facing today's young people?
young people have so much that is being thrown at them. You know, the information world has all kinds of stuff out there. The internet, on the cell phones, on the computers, people calling, and so much of that information is bogus. So people don't know what to believe. And young people are very vulnerable because to a great degree they believe a lot of what somebody says. They don't put a lot of weight into the credibility of the source of the information that they're getting. That is a major problem. The influence that technology is having on people. Also, the relationship that young people have with each other, with people in their community, within their schools, and wherever they are in, whatever situation they're in, they're having some real challenges in terms of having a wholesome relationship with people. You know, I hear people talk periodically and they'll say that years ago, and my daughter was an example of this. My daughter, when we were in Detroit, we had neighbors across the street, and my daughter would go over and play with the young girl across the street. And one day they got into an argument. And so she came back home crying, and I said, wait a minute, look, you need to go back over the street, across the street, and the two of you need to work this out. Parents didn't go do that, they did that. And so they became good friends. Today, when one person, a young person gets in a disagreement with another person, the parents come in. And so the two people don't get an opportunity to try to get this resolved at some practical level. And so that becomes a problem, the intervention of parents. And unfortunately, what the parents are doing doesn't help matters, because then it becomes a threatening situation. Well, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z because you said such and such about my child. And not only does that happen in the communities, but that happens in the schools. You know, it used to be that when something happened at the school, the teacher would call or the administrator would call and say, Miss Jones, you know, Sally got into a problem at school. Would you come in and let's talk about it? Well, now the teachers come in armed, you know, either literally or figuratively. And so their first thing is to believe what the child has said, as opposed to trying to get the real story in terms of what has happened.
Said it, but what would be the message that you would give young people?
I have a thing that I teach a course for a group called SOAR, and it's an executive training program. Yeah, it's an executive training program, and it's for African Americans who potentially can go into the C-suite positions. And most of the big companies around here, we train those African American guys. It's about 12 to 15 of them a year.
What's the C-suite?
That's an executive.
C-suite is.
The C-suite is the top. You get into the top decision-making roles in the company. You're not. Most of the people I trained, they were top managers who managed the products, you know, line. But the C-suite is where you make decisions. You become a person that goes behind the doors, and you sit down, you plot for the whole company what's going to be happening for that year and where the money is going and kinds of things you have to do. So you're changing from just a manager of something to a leader. And that whole leadership role is different. But for black men, it is really different, because you're suspect all the way through. Even though they may give you the chance to be the leader, to be one of the leaders in the company, you're still suspect. Because I know I got that same break when I was with government. I was one of 10 African Americans who was selected to go into executive training for the Treasury Department. But the problem is that, you know, you were there was a lot of expectations on you. I don't guess it was a problem, it was an opportunity for me. But you still had to have a vision. And if you go in without that vision of where you stand, because I was not gonna manage, well, I managed people, but it was the leadership. I had to lead the people. I had to lead programs. I was not attached to so many widgets. Now, I came up through a training program that helped me to do that. But the end result was I was in the decision-making capacity. So over the years, I began to realize, like in going back to Southern, my education instructors was saying, you know, we had a course called the philosophy of education. And Dr. Edge was one that taught one of those courses, and he would say, you can't be a good teacher without a good educational philosophy. It's impossible. But I remember that when I was at Morristown, they said, you know, Morristown is a religious school. You have to have some idea about what your core system is going to be in order for you to be here. So we all had to go to Wednesday night vespers at the church on campus, and we had to go to church on Sundays. And what they were doing was saying, no, these are the things that would make you a full man, because you're now learning stuff that needs to be a part of your core system. And so what we do in SOAR was we would actually take these guys, and it's not a matter of training them to be anything, because they were like lawyers, they were pharmacists, they were engineers, they all had that training. What they did not have was, how do I translate that into who I am and my core system? For one of the things we found out, many of them, once you start moving up that ladder in corporate America, the divorces start happening. Things start breaking down around people who know you. And part of it is because you're not really grappling with the core makeup of yourself. What you're doing is, I'm meeting this need to be important in the corporation, but I'm not really taking care of myself or my family. And to a person, we had in the training a thing called the family factor, because the ones who tended to build good families tended to be better black executives, And so I always had, part of the things here, that I have people come in and talk about the family, what happened to you. We even had white executives who come in and talk to the group and said, what would you do differently? I take better care of my family. But see, the company doesn't tell. The company says, if you got to move from Louisville to California, which I was, first thing you told me in government, you're going to be moving. But I never translated, and I need to tell my family I'm going to be moving. And that the move is not negative, because many of those guys look at it, the family called me and said, no, Pop, I want to stay here. All my friends are here, I need to stay here. Why are you moving? You're always moving, and no answer, because there was no real effort to really say, what was your core reason? Part of your job performance and your ability is going to be based on not having to go home and fight home as well as the people at work. So what we try to do is to say, hey, fellas, what you need to do is to start looking at yourself from a core standpoint,
So how did you do that? What did you do?
Well, one of the things that we did, I had what I call participation training. We took, now, we did some things like in management psychology and stuff like that, but that wasn't what they needed. They needed to know, how do I lead people from a standpoint of not just walk in and say, I'm your boss, I told you to do this, do it. to being able to walk in and have a presence with your group and say, you know, here's what I like to see us do. You know, how can we work together to do it? Being able to tell the folks about your family, being able to tell them about the kinds of things that go on, and still be able to say, I'm a leader. But if it comes time to fire you, I can fire you with dignity because I'm not doing anything that you and I are opposed to, it's just that you're not performing.